Hello and welcome to One Week, One Year, a podcast where we watch and discuss every year of film history in order, starting in 1895, the dawn of cinema. And this episode is our 1930s Decade in Review.
Hey,
It's our casual time, which is
it's our
why we've got.
casual party episode.
Yeah.
Another decade of the books.
I love the way this punctuates everything, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why we got cocktails. Normally we would not be so
Normally we'd be professional
very
about it, but
professional. We're very
yeah,
professional.
we're
Anyway,
known for professionalism on this show.
this is we're going to talk about the movies in the 1930s, but I'm one of your hosts, Chris Ellie. I'm a film projectionist, and joining me as always is
I'm Glenn Covell. I'm a filmmaker.
mm, and we're here basking in the 1930s.
Oh, aesthetically, my favorite decade.
That yes, the Indiana Jones poster behind you really
Yeah,
really sells
in
that.
pretty much every other respect, garbage decade. Well, good movies too, but yeah.
Good movies. Garbage for things besides movies. For this episode, we're going to be talking about two movies that we watched, two kind of newer movies that we watched that kind of cover the 1930s filmmaking era.
Both of them were like, kinda.
um, and then we're gonna do our top tens of the 1930s.
Yeah,
Which I'm curious to see. This was a tough list to whittle down. There were some good movies in
yeah.
this decade.
I feel like for whatever reason, I remember like the 20s list kind of being easier to like put together.
I feel like the great movies stood out a lot more from the good movies in the 20s, where
Right.
like in
Yeah.
the 30s there's just a lot of really good stuff.
Right. Yeah. I feel like the 20s had like absolute like pinnacle bangers and then a bunch of stuff that was like that's not good at all. And then, whereas I feel
Yeah.
like 30s was much more even-handed kind of like just a lot. Oh yeah, a lot of good ones.
hmm yeah, I made a like top 2021 list or something like that, and
Oh wow.
I'll only reveal the top 10 unless I feel like like not doing that. um yeah, and so we're this is a chill podcast, so we're drinking. We've both got bee's knees cocktails, era appropriate cocktails.
Exactly.
You've got it in a coupe glass, which is probably more appropriate
Era
than what I
appropriate
have.
glassware. I mean, whatever. It's the 30s. They're drinking out of whatever they had on hand.
Yeah. I want to say that last night I went to a bar here in Denver that's called the Thin Man, because I
Mm.
felt like this is, we gotta soak in those 30s movies vibes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go to the Thin Man bar, and I ordered a Nick and Nora, and he
Great.
said, "What is that?" I don't want to put anybody on blast. Like, I don't want to be that guy. But your bar is called the Thin Man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm unfamiliar with like what that is. I know because there's a glass that's a Nick and Nora glass.
Yeah.
I think they drink martinis in the movie.
I think the Nick and Nora cocktail is like kind of a riff on a martini,
Yeah.
like
I feel
similar
like
to how it
it
was
would have to
described in the
be.
book.
Yeah.
But alas, I had a Manhattan and a beer instead.
There you go. Did it come in a Nick and Nora glass?
No, it came in a what did it come in?
A
It came in a
Manhattan
rocks
glass?
glass.
Oh, not supposed to.
I'm not trying to put anybody on blast. We're here to have a good time. To that end, let's have a good time by talking about some movies.
Yeah.
We're gonna save listen to us talk about some other movies, and then we'll get to the top tens. We gotta tease it a little bit.
Yeah.
Make it through the podcast before you hear about our top tens, or just skip forward. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not a cop.
There's no rules.
uh, shall we start with The Aviator?
Sure.
The Aviator, 2004, directed by Martin Scorsese.
Yeah, our second Scorsese movie on our decade in review.
This guy likes film
Yes.
history, I guess.
He does, yeah. Surprise, surprise.
Number one popular booster of film history, and
Yeah.
he made a couple movies that are soaked in it. Yeah, The Aviator is a good movie.
Yeah. Probably one of my favorites, honestly. Like rewatching
Hmm.
it for this show, I was like, it's a great movie. I love this thing. I've seen it a lot of times.
Hmm.
I for whatever reason I feel like this is like I don't know. It's one I've like it's kind of a good it's like not really this kind of movie, but I kind of like it as like a vibes movie.
I could see that.
It
I
does
think
have good vibes throughout a lot of it, not throughout all of it, but yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think even it's a nearly 3 hour long movie. There are a lot of people who will just throw on Lord of the Rings every
Hmm.
other week for background stuff, and
Yeah.
I think that someone of a certain persuasion could definitely throw on the Aviator and just tune in every once in a while. You know.
Yeah. I remember this was the Aviator was a fairly early pandemic watch for me,
Hmm.
which felt very apt
Oh
because of
yeah.
its long extended scene of Howard Hughes just sitting in his own filth watching movies for like weeks on end.
Isn't that just what this podcast is, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Sitting in our own filth, watching movies. Uh, um, yeah. So, I mean, if you all are not familiar, this is a biopic of Howard Hughes, uh, portrayed by Leonardo DiCaprio, and it covers kind of the making of the movie Hell's Angels, which we covered on the podcast,
Hmm.
uh, and and then his kind of life as an aviation industrialist.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
I think that the main, I think one of the main reasons to watch it for this show was, I mean, we watched Hell's Angels and talked about it on the show, so like there's that obviously. But I think even that is like a fairly small portion of the movie. But the whole thing is like set in Hollywood between like 27, I think like 27 and 47. And so like a good chunk of it is set in the 30s, and so it just has lots of good like 30s Hollywood kind of vibes and like characters that pop in and out and like
Yeah,
it's
we've got a lot of Hollywood stars and celebrities, but
yeah,
mostly
played by contemporary stars and celebrities.
yeah. But the one who we get the most of is Katharine Hepburn,
Yeah,
played by Kate Blanchett, um, and it's kind of a spot on impersonation, you know.
crushes it. Like Kate Blanchett is so like rewatching it, I'm like she might be honestly like my favorite performance in the whole movie. Like
Yeah,
I think she kind of comes away as like MVP.
I mean, I believe she won Best Actress for this.
Oh dang, yeah, you're right.
Something that I kind of wondered is like, how much Katharine Hepburn really talks like that, you know?
I think
Uh
she did though.
maybe she did. Cuz
She certainly does in all of her movies.
right. Actually, like last night I peeked ahead to 1940 a little bit and I watched the Philadelphia Story, which has Katharine
Hmm.
Hepburn in it. And so it was um I had her voice fresh in my memory when I watched this performance. And the I think the thing that like just immediately sold me on the Katharine Hepburn performance was the laugh that she does toward the beginning. She does this laugh in Philadelphia Story and Bring Up Baby of she'll say something and just go like ah, ha, ha,
I
ha. And yeah, very well observed, very very good.
mean, I guess Katharine Hepburn was in real life played golf, but I feel like that one of the first scenes that she's in The Aviator, she's playing golf, and it definitely reminded me of Bring Up Baby.
Yeah,
I
I
think
kind
I think intentionally. I think Scorsese was doing a little sort of like, hey, playing golf, just like in the olden pictures.
it looked like that scene. I actually, because right before that scene there was a director's chair that had Cary Grant's name on it,
Hmm.
and I rewound once I saw that golf scene because I thought that it might have been meant to be literally bringing up baby that this was happening
It's
with.
not. It's a different. It's supposed to be a different movie. I
Yeah,
forget what it is now. It's one that we did not watch for the show, but because I was like trying to look up. They do make a lot of references to like movies that are in production or like people are like talking about whenever people are hanging out, like the Coconut Grove nightclub in this movie. They're all talking showbiz.
Yes.
And so there's lots of like little like very kind of like subtle references to just like what things are like in production, which is kind of funny. Like they're not like name dropping titles, but they're just sort of like offhand like mentioning different like movies that are being worked on.
Yeah, and there's just like, yeah, a lot of mention of, certain celebrities that are around at the time, or like, there's a this and Mank both has someone playing Louis B. Mayer
Right.
of
Yeah.
MGM. Uh so like executives as well.
Neither of
Uh
which I think are particularly flattering. I
no,
feel
I
like
guess not.
Mank
Yeah.
goes a lot harder on that, but still, I feel like Louis Mayer doesn't come across as like a super, I don't know, friendly guy in this movie either.
He doesn't want to give Howard Hughes another two cameras.
Yeah.
He laughs in his face. Um,
Um. Yeah. I don't know I don't know if we need to like I don't know break down this movie or I mean it is kind of tangentially about filmmaking. It's sort of it
mhm.
starts off and there's a lot of stuff about filmmaking because he's making Hell's Angels and he's like really into it, but then it kind of
It's like
you know
depicting the existence of production hell in
right
of,
yeah
of Hell's Angels,
yeah
uh, which it's unclear how many of these. I think probably a lot of the broad strokes details are more or less correct, but it's interesting kind of seeing the depiction of this production that we know was horrifically
yeah
challenged. I hadn't seen this movie since probably, I don't know, I was like 14, 15, something like that. So I don't
oh dang
remember it super. I didn't remember it super well.
yeah
Um, but I mean, another thing that I had forgotten about, but at the time I really had no context for understanding, was that like the first 45 minutes of this movie are in a two strip or like a two color effect, as
yeah
uh, in this kind of early era of digital color grading post "Oh Brother Where Art Thou." They're just like, let's go wild, you know.
yeah yeah I found like I don't know if it's like from the DVD or whatever where like Scorsese talks about why he wanted that first chunk of the movie to be in like fake two strip Technicolor
It's
kind of.
not two strip Technicolor though. It is.
Well,
It
not
is.
right because it's
Yeah.
they didn't actually shoot it in that, but it's like
No, no,
it's
no. It's
emulating that
no. It's
thing.
emulating multicolor. Because two
Oh,
strip Technicolor is red and green, and multicolor was a color process that Howard Hughes like owned, uh, which was blue, like cyan and red. Uh,
oh,
which is why uh, uh, they can still have a blue sky in this movie. That was kind of confusing me for a second.
hmm,
But there were like competing color systems in the two strip era, quote unquote two strip era, before it all kind of converged on three strip Technicolor. And yeah, there was one that Howard Hughes kind of bought and owned
oh,
and
dang.
used for. I think
Presumably, what he used for Hell's Angels, right?
well, but Hell's Angels was the two strip scene was red and green.
Hmm.
Uh uh
Yeah.
and I don't know exactly what the deal with that was. I know that like this multicolor process was something that they weren't able to release Hell's Angels in the way that it was shot, and so like they couldn't produce the prints fast enough, so they were printed in two strip Technicolor, the
Hmm.
so like green and red. um it's possible it was shot in blue and red, but that doesn't really make sense why that would happen,
Hmm.
or like how that would still remain naturalistic. But either way, yes, it was not shot. This was confusing me, so I like went on a deep dive
Yeah.
with this. It was not shot to look like two strip Technicolor. It was shot to look like multicolor.
I mean, great.
But
I
anyway,
mean, that is, I think, for our show and what we're talking about, that is an important distinction to make.
sure, yes.
Also, it is wild, like how obvious that is to me now. Like, it looks so kind of funky, right? It's like so
Yeah,
obviously only two colors.
yeah.
I remember, like, I saw this movie when it came out in theaters when I was
Mm.
what 13. Um, and I remember the only time I even
You were
like,
almost as old as his girlfriend in the movie.
oh god, yeah. I I only noticed that when he's eating his peas, and the peas are like bright cyan colored. I'm like, why are the peas a weird color?
Yeah, and when they're golfing, like all of the green grass is just bright blue.
Yeah.
Uh,
But
but
even so, like, I don't remember ever noticing any other like weird colors watching this movie
yeah, it's
until much later.
in some ways it's kind of subtle. I think that uh, a lot of the two strip stuff that we've seen looks kind of shitty, you know.
Mm,
Uh, they either it is something to do with the restoration or the way that it's degraded, or it's just like the way that the film was, that like
yeah.
colors were kind of like floaty and
Right. They
um
don't always line up.
yeah, and it
Yeah.
just yeah, it looked off, and this was, you know, of course, very sharp.
Hmm.
uh and so um that almost felt like, you know, it's this kind of like, what if it was like this, you know?
Right. Yeah.
I would love to see more stuff like that. I think it was so neat, you know.
Yeah. I think it's a very cool choice. Uh, I commend Scorsese for like taking a swing like that because I feel like not a lot of people necessarily would. I think they might think it's like too weird or too off putting.
I'm sure that it confused a lot of people when the movie came out, because there really is no explanation for it, you
No,
know?
yeah, unless you know, like, that old movies looked like that kind of, then
And
that's
a
the
very
only.
specific era of old movies too.
Right, yeah, it's, like, only late 20s and, like, early 30s, kind of, like, the very specific time period that this movie starts out in, so.
I wonder. I'm just looking this up right now. Um, Sometimes when there's something kind of funky going on with a movie, uh, uh, when they send it out to theaters, they'll send like a kind of letter to go along with it to the
Oh, huh.
projectionist, and you can sometimes find these online, but I am not seeing it right now. I'm seeing someone saying, uh, "Could the Aviator be remastered with color that looks better?" No, hell no.
Yeah, correct.
But yeah, I'm sure that like that definitely confuse some people around the time.
Mhm.
Uh, and it doesn't really even make a big show of like when it goes back to normal color. Uh, uh,
Well, because then, right, somewhere around, like, a not quite halfway through, it switches to more of a sort of, like, three-strip Technicolor look. I think that was the intent anyways, that it's like because the rest of the movie is like super bright saturated colors.
hmm. I guess I didn't really
Um
notice that. I
I
kind
think a
of
lot
just
of the
thought it looked normal.
I think a lot of like the production design kind of is sort of leaning into that too, of like a lot of like bright blues and reds and things that
Mm,
kind of
hmm.
look good in that I don't know, aesthetic, whatever. But yeah, it is sort of like after watching whatever 45 minutes of the movie in like weird, cyan red vision, then it goes to like more colors, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is how it's normal movies look. And um, I think maybe some of the effect of the kind of like slightly more technicolory colors, it doesn't quite hit as much. Um,
So this movie has some other kind of I don't know, worth mentioning hints toward film industry in the era. One of which is the motion picture production code. Uh,
yeah,
there's a scene where Howard Hughes is presenting in front of the what are they called, the association. Oh my god, uh, help me.
the I don't know, yeah,
the
the
the prudes. He's
yeah,
presenting in front of the prudes who want to destroy cinema, and one of them, they name drop Breen, uh,
yeah.
uh, which, you know, very well observed. You know, it's interesting because,
Who
you know,
does
these,
a bunch of tutting. He's like, oh,
yes, and the scene ends with a with a the 1930s equivalent of a PowerPoint presentation of boobs. And it's pretty funny, but yeah, there's a lot of details in this movie that I really appreciate, that I think a lot of the audience watching it probably would not, have any, no ability
Mm,
to know what it is.
right.
But it is these like little carefully observed details and just historical accuracy, which is never, it's never something that I have been too educated on. So I'm not just like, oh, that clay pot in this medieval movie, it fits exactly. Oh my god, But I am like that when it comes to them mentioning Olivia de Havilland and Joseph Breen.
There you go. Yeah, now we know all this stuff. And so,
Doing this podcast has turned us into pedantic nerds.
yeah, I mean, I was already, but I know I'm just slightly more pedantic and nerdy. I do love that scene. I think it works even without knowing about like the Hays Code. Like you get that
Mhm.
it's like the stodgy like censor people like don't want Howard Hughes to put boobs in his movies, and he does this whole thing of just like, aha, but you see, there have been many boobs in many other movies that have not been a problem. And it's this kind of thing where I don't know, it's like it endears you to that character so much where you're like, hell yeah, you tell him, Howard.
You know what's funny is that that scene is exactly kind of something that I did, not with boobs, but with, so I was not allowed to play M-rated games when I was a kid, and I really wanted to play Halo. I wanted to convince my parents that I could get Halo, and so I like went on the internet and I downloaded a bunch of pictures. And I like made an entire like essay with screenshots and like fill in information of just like, here is why Halo isn't that M rated and I should be allowed to play it. And
Like
so I had like,
blood color comparisons
yeah,
between
exactly. I was like, Exhibit A, the alien blood is blue. It's not as violent as it would be if it was red. uh, and breaking down the whole ESRB rating and everything. And you know what? It didn't work.
ah, you should have had Ian Holm there with his calipers.
That would have helped. Yeah,
Yeah, I do
calipers
love
are.
how Ian Holm is he's introduced early in the movie as he's a meteorologist because he Howard Hughes is trying to find clouds that look like boobs for his airplane picture.
That's right.
And so he has to hire a meteorologist. But I like how he keeps going back throughout the movie for just other unrelated things. He just likes this scientist that he
Well, he's
found.
he's on the payroll now, right? He's
Right,
like,
but it's like he's just like we'll bring him in for other non-weather related stuff. He's like, you're a scientist, you can help. Definitely, I think especially like the early kind of like directing of Hell's Angels stuff is kind of a very good example of like I don't know, kind of the cliche like cartoon 1930s director, which I guess Howard Hughes kind of embodied to some degree, where he's like
mhm.
he's got his jodhpurs on and his leather jacket, and he's just like making absurd demands from everyone around him. Of
I
just sort
o-
of like, no, it's got to be like this. It's got to be. No, it's like the clouds need to look like boobs. I need 26 cameras. Yada yada yada. And it's I don't know. It's exciting. It's like watching it. You're like, let this guy cook, you know. Um, and so I don't know. I often think of this movie um just in relation to like what directing a movie kind of feels like, which is like
Hmm.
having way too much responsibility for something that is deeply silly.
What, movies as a thing?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just like you're asking so many people to like invest so much time and effort into this thing, and it's like I don't know, you're just like, I want to see airplanes blow up, and it's like I don't know, it's just that's I feel like it gets the feeling of
Hmm.
what filmmaking feels like really well. Um, and part of that is kind of the absurdity of it.
That's tricky. I mean, I feel like I'm maybe too self-conscious to get people in on the things that I want that are silly, you know? If I'm doing
Mm,
something big and silly, I feel like I need to do it myself because you know, I would be too self-conscious to say like, yes, you dedicate your time to my silly thing right now. You know?
yeah, yeah. I also just want to shout out funny thing is that Adam Scott plays Howard Hughes, what, press agent, I think.
Hmm.
And I feel like most people in this movie, Kate Blanchett stuff is doing like a real, like, very sharply observed sort of like evocation of Katharine Hepburn. But I feel like for the most part, people are like they're acting like normal acting performances in a movie. Whereas Adam Scott, I think, is like really hitting the like 1930s voice,
Hmm.
which I just find really amusing because that's not a thing he does often in things.
It's got to be an early role for him, right? Like, it's before Step
I
Brothers,
mean,
I think.
yeah, I guess so. Um, that is another thing I like about Scorsese. He'll cast like comedic actor people who are like known for comedy in dramatic
Mm.
roles a
Hmm.
lot. I feel like he just is like, I like that guy. Put him in the movie. Um, Errol Flynn shows up and is kind of an asshole,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
as as per his reputation. Played by Jude Law, which is
Little cameo.
I feel like it's good casting. Um,
In that scene with Errol Flynn, like you know, they're at a party and ordering. The impression that I got is that they are using code words to order cocktails, and that they're just saying
mm,
like, you know, I'll have a juice, you know, I'll have a bottle of milk, and I thought, oh, like this is all code, and then
well,
when I
Howard Hughes actually just does drink milk.
yeah,
Yeah,
it wasn't until like yeah later in the movie I went, oh, the milk was literal. This is
yeah.
yeah
I hadn't
the
thought about that. Is probably true for everyone else at the table.
yeah.
Because I think there were like kind of three like big scenes set at the Coconut Grove nightclub, which doesn't exist anymore. But there's like one set in the 20s, there's one set in the 30s, and then one set in the 40s,
Hmm.
and that's the one that's set in the 30s. So I mean, like, I think that might be post Prohibition though. If we're really I was trying to like really follow like the timeline of this movie really closely, and it definitely
Mm.
fudges a lot of the dates. Like, there's things that like Howard Hughes meets Ava Gardner like way before she would have even like had a career in Hollywood,
Hmm.
because that wasn't until like later in like the late 40s, I think. But so the timeline of this movie is a little fudged, but it's whatever, it's a movie. But yeah, I think it just in terms of like its its portrayal of like 1930s Hollywood, I feel like this movie is probably the most, it was the first thing I thought of anyway in terms of like stuff that we should watch. This and The Rocketeer, I guess, but there's a lot of crossover between the two, so it seemed redundant to watch both.
Yeah, I kind of wish we watched The Rocketeer though. Maybe we'll just do it when we get to our like 1991 question mark episode.
Sure, yeah. Why not?
Is
Or
it
just
91?
yeah, it is 91. Yeah. Or just watch The Rocketeer for because it's a fun movie.
Yeah.
That also has a lot of like 30s nightclub, like, ooh, all the stars are out kind of stuff. Anything else to say about The Aviator?
Nope.
Cool movie. I'm a fan.
Yeah, it's good. I have it on
Scorsese knows what he's doing.
DVD, and I will be watching some more special features later. The other movie that we're talking about that concerns 1930s Hollywood is Gods and Monsters.
Indeed.
The James James
James
Condon
Caan.
James Corden
Yeah, the James
the
Corden film.
the Bill Condon directed
Yeah.
biopic of
James Whale.
James Whale. Okay,
Yeah.
you can see where my wires got crossed here. Um,
This feels like less of a biopic, I guess, than The Aviator is.
yeah,
I don't
I
know.
mean,
Biopic is
well,
such kind of a loose terminology anyway.
so here's the thing. Like, I think that this kind of has a bit more of. I think this movie is neat, but I think this is more of a biopic derogatory than than The Aviator is, you know? Like The Aviator is a movie that I think is a very well done biopic, and this is a movie that has a lot of 90s Hollywood cliches in it. Uh
Sure. Yeah.
and I think that one of my takeaways from this movie really is that it is almost incidentally about the person that it's about. Uh, I think the movie is kind of more concerned with like trauma, queerness, and yeah, like it's more concerned with those two things than uh, Bride of Frankenstein or James Whale as a person.
I don't know, but I feel like it's using a lot of the sort of details of James Whale's life and his kind of place in Hollywood to kind of build the story off of. I don't know. I feel like if you, I don't know, you could probably make this about like a fictional director and it would still work. But I do think the way it kind of integrates
It's cool.
specifically Bride of Frankenstein
Yeah,
in,
it, it brings it in for theming.
yeah, and there's all of this stuff about creation and monsters and I don't know. I thought it sort of used like James Whale's filmography, I guess filmography, really just Bride of Frankenstein and
Yeah.
Frankenstein. Um, I like the way that it kind of incorporated that into the movie, and it wasn't just kind of background stuff. Like
Mm.
I think even like stylistically, it starts to kind of. I mean, there's like the dream sequence, right, which is like shot for shot
That's
stuff
fun.
from Bride of
Yeah.
Frankenstein. But then even outside of that, I feel like sometimes the movie starts to get a little bit crazier, and it kind of leans into more gothic James Whaley
Hmm.
kind of style.
Fair.
A little
Fair.
bit, a little bit.
Uh
This
yeah,
is this is I think even more than The Aviator, like tangentially about 30s Hollywood. I mean, it doesn't even really take place in the 1930s. So
it takes place in the 50s, but there is a
there's
you
one.
know,
We got
this
one scene.
yeah, there's a scene that I really enjoyed that feels like the kind of flashback scene in Hugo in a lot of ways.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is just
Actually,
showing younger James Whale directing Bride of
yeah.
Frankenstein.
Both this and Hugo are about sort of like famous directors, sort of after their as like bitter old men, kind of.
Yeah, yeah, true. Although, yeah, this one is incorrigibly horny in
Yeah,
this movie. uh, there's a lot of like, there's a number of like kind of fun jokes about uh his just unending horniness in this movie. Uh, he can't resist, and uh I think everyone just kind of rolls their eyes and they're just like, that's Jimmy for you, you
yeah.
know.
Oh boy, there he goes again.
There he goes again, playing a strip interview with
Yeah.
with someone who's come to cover him.
I mean, it's definitely like I think the movie knows that it's like um a little creepy. Like I think the movie is sort of like, all right, James is getting a little, he's pushing a little far with his horniness.
Yeah, which I think is kind of interesting given its place as a 1998 movie, right? This is
Hmm.
a movie that, is about a gay man who is being played by a gay man. And it, I was kind of surprised at how willing it was to allow him to be, I don't know, reprehensible at times.
Mm,
uh you'd think that kind of like a 90s Hollywood portrayal at this time would probably just be like a little less complex because they're at the kind of bare minimum of representation in the first place,
right. Yeah.
but the way this movie ends is like very kind of morally murky in a lot of ways, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
uh uh
It did definitely stick out to me. I think like the late 90s in particular were like seemed to me like a particularly kind of like homophobic time in Hollywood filmmaking.
You think so?
I don't know. I don't think of that being as like a good time for like queer filmmaking in general.
I mean, I'm thinking about stuff like Philadelphia and these kind of like, 90s prestige movies where a straight actor would play gay and it would be like
But
this.
that's what I mean though. It's like, no, we got Tom Hanks to like play a gay guy. And it's like, well, you could have just got an actual a gay actor instead. I
Yeah.
mean, Philadelphia is a kind of that movie probably wouldn't have gotten made unless Tom Hanks was in it. I don't know. But there is something I think somewhat it's notable that Ian McKellen is in this movie as
Yeah.
opposed to someone else.
Yeah.
And also the Bill Cotton, also a gay director. So it's
Mhm.
like I think that struck me as uh the kind of thing where I don't know how common that was in late 90s movies.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a movie that I think like speaking of just kind of gay stuff, it like engages in camp or no, it deals with the idea of camp without directly engaging with it. It's a pretty self-serious movie, I think. But
Hmm.
then
Yeah.
uh uh they're talking about sort of the intentional camp of Bride of Frankenstein, and then the dream sequence and everything. I think that like maybe within gay spaces in maybe the 80s or 70s, uh the way that gay representation was able to happen was through camp, where this is maybe
Mm.
like one of these kind of early like these like 90s self-serious gay dramas, uh
Yeah.
a la Philadelphia. But maybe just its awareness of the idea of camp does kind of lend sort of credence to it being a more thoroughly gay production than something like Philadelphia.
Yeah, maybe. Um I like that take. I do kind of like how it's like I don't know, just like showing people in this movie watching Bride of Frankenstein like not getting it. That it's like
Uh-huh.
in that it is camp, that it's like intentionally I mean I think has even like James Well says in the movie, it's like it's laughing at death. It's like a comedy about death,
Hmm.
which then was the thing I mean definitely when we watched Bride of Frankenstein, I was like, oh yeah, I get the tone of this movie very easily. Like I um I unlike some of the characters in the movie, I wasn't like, what? I thought this was supposed to be scary. Whoa, you know. But but then like the way in which it sort of like gets more into his history of like his sort of like upbringing in poverty and like being in World War One and just his like the intenseness of that. And I thought that was at least an interesting insight into like why he might have made the movie in that way.
Why he might have made Bride of Frankenstein that way.
Yeah, of like I'm gonna make a movie about death, but it's gonna be sort of comedic in a
Right.
lot of ways. And that it also kind of reminded me of just like a thing that we noticed in like the 1920s movies is like the different types of movies that people were making about World War One who had actually experienced it.
Hmm.
And there's
Hmm.
like the French I feel like make these like very serious like tragic dramas, and then like the Americans make these like really sort of like bombastic like action movies, and then the German movies are like not explicitly about World War One, they're just like nightmare horror movies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I don't know, I thought that was really interesting that they I mean that's not, there are German movies about World War One that are just, straight war dramas, but like I thought that like
We might be
there
talking about some later.
eh, I don't know, I thought that was like an interesting that was just a thing that I noticed where it was like a lot of the German filmmakers who had lived through World War One were taking those experiences and sort of like using them to tell these sort of like really kind of esoteric horror stories.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what I hadn't thought of that while watching any of James Whale's movies that we watched, but I think that's an interesting perspective that I hadn't really thought about until I watched Gods and Monsters.
Yeah, it's an interesting read. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unclear to me like how based in reality it is, but I think that it is. Certainly him being in the trenches in World War I, he would have a certain relationship with death, and
Hmm.
Frankenstein is about death in many ways. So I think it's a reasonable connection, regardless of how accurately, like, historically based it is.
Hmm.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
This is a movie that is interesting in that it's a biography, but it's based on a book, and
I mean,
it's
it's
kind
like
of.
I don't know. It's kind of more historical fiction, I think, than
Exactly.
like
I mean, it's
biography.
got,
Yeah.
like, you know, it's got very obviously fictional characters who are kind of meant to sort of use a real person's life as a jumping off point
Yeah.
for the themes that they just want to explore in this movie in particular.
Right.
Which is why I ended up kind of feeling like the fact that it is James Whale specifically feels a little bit incidental, because, like, this movie is about is not like a director, but it's about, like, a guy whose life and mind are deteriorating, and while that's happening, it's bringing up a bunch of horrific memories for him.
Mm.
uh
Yeah.
and, like, that could be a story about anybody, but they decided to make it about James Whale.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could somewhat make that argument about like the Aviator's about a guy who has like all this money and power and control, but it's like his brain is deteriorating from disease, and he's like,
Is that the title of this? Do we do episode titles for year reviews? Maybe
I
not.
don't think so.
But brain deteriorating.
Yeah. That's
uh,
what's happening to us right now.
Cheers.
Yay. I mean, we haven't talked about Brendan Fraser in this movie, who I think is very good in it.
Yeah.
As is Ian McKellen. I mean, the movie begins and ends with Brendan Fraser's character, whose name escapes me. Um, and I feel like he is almost kind of like the point of view character of like, right, he's our kind of way in to like learning about James Whale.
In particular, I think he's like a point of view character for, like, lightly homophobic '90s people, right?
Also very true, right? Yeah. Um, for them to be like, hey, I'm with this tough guy. It took me way too long to realize that his sort of like weird 50s haircut is like flat on top, like Frankenstein's monster.
Right. Yes.
I was like, it wasn't until he like shows up like dressed in the costume. I'm like, oh, I get it. That's why his hair looks like that. But I don't know. Yeah, it's like love to see Brendan Fraser pop up in stuff. I think he's good in this movie. Um, get a lot of good beefcake moments with him uh, gardening
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
James Whale like leering out the window.
Yeah. I mean, like, talking about the way that this movie is willing to kind of problematize. I don't know. It's willing to do a gay performance, a gay represent, like an example of gay representation that is not uncomplex, uh,
Right? Yeah.
especially in the way that we see Brendan Fraser's character, and the way that uh, James Whale interacts with Brendan Fraser's character, where, like, in this movie there are scenes. The place where it's going is that it's like Brendan Fraser's character kind of has these sort of gay leanings that he is pushing away from himself, and as he is willing to kind of slowly move in that direction and explore his reality of his sexuality, it is kind of predated upon by the protagonist. And it's not treated respectfully. He's treated as like um he's treated as an object at times, and
Mhm.
so uh you see this person almost turn away from their like kind of homosexual inclinations because the kind of person mentor who would be bringing him into this world is somebody who is kind of like sick in the head at this moment, and is willing to basically take advantage of this guy in order to uh, uh, suicide by proxy
Yeah.
via like a homophobic reaction. It's very complex.
He's trying to create a monster.
That I guess he
Don't
is.
you see? Yeah. Um, Not enough talk about Invisible Man in this movie. I thought I wanted more Invisible Man talk, but
Yeah,
that's I mean that's not what the movie's about. So
I wanted more old movies, but maybe that's just because I have an old movie podcast.
yeah, right. Yeah, like the one scene of like the flashback to like him shooting Bride of Frankenstein. I was like, no, I want more. I want more film set scenes.
I guess the old movie stuff in this movie is uh like with them meeting in the 50s, but like meeting some more kind of named celebrities.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's like a lot of like gossip in this movie. It's like George Cukor is gay.
Yeah.
Boris Karloff is boring as a person. uh Oh, one really good detail in this movie is that the end credits say a good cast is worth repeating, like it
Hey.
does at the end of
Yeah.
Bride of Frankenstein. Uh, and yeah, also there's a point where Brendan Fraser's character is meeting a princess, and then Ian McKellen says, "Oh, he's never met a princess, only queens." And
Ah!
I burst out laughing. It's a good joke.
um. Yeah. I do think it's kind of funny how like this movie's set in the 50s, so it's like not even right. It's like 20 years post. You
I think he
know.
was saying it had been 15 years since he'd made a movie, if I'm
Right.
remembering right.
I don't know. It's funny that people in this movie are like, "Oh, Frankenstein, that old movie," and it's like not a very old movie when this movie takes place.
The Aviator, that old movie.
Right. Exactly. Also, this movie reminded me a lot of Sunset Boulevard. I think not accidentally.
I need to watch
Um,
that movie. I mean,
I
maybe we'll
mean,
just watch it
we'll
for the
watch it
show.
in 9 episodes, so I mean,
Yeah.
we'll get there fairly soon. But definitely the idea of sort of like the older sort of like Hollywood figure, um, with this sort of like weird, not that healthy relationship with like a younger person that like is around their house. Um, a lot of death in pools. Um,
Oh,
Not opening scene, not a spoiler. But yeah, I don't know. That was just a thing that kind of stuck out. Was it has some real Sunset Boulevard vibes.
hmm.
Yeah. Anything else to say about Gods and Monsters?
Oh, I'm ready to get down to that top 10.
All
That
right, here we go. Let's
delicious
do
top
it.
10.
You want to go first with number 10?
Sure. So my number 10 is this was very difficult because there are maybe like 4 movies that I want to put in this position.
Mm.
And I like roughly let me just like shout out the 3 that didn't make it,
Okay,
which
okay.
are which
So it's
are
sort of the honorable mentions.
the yeah. I don't know. I think this would be a little overburdened if we did honorable mentions because I have a lot. But the 3 that I feel like I could put in this position besides this movie
Hmm.
on a different day would be Modern Times, The Thin Man, and Port of Shadows. But for my number 10, I put The Invisible Man. Uh,
Okay.
I felt like I needed some universal
A
horror,
James Whale picture.
a James Whale picture. I think the best Universal monster movie that we watched, personally, and
It's up there.
uh, and I think it's a lot of fun. It's very dark, very funny, and yeah, I liked it a lot. The Invisible Man. Check it out.
Me
That's
too.
my number
Yeah.
10.
Um, my number 10 is Stagecoach, the
Ah.
John Ford Western, which I mean we just talked about last episode. Um,
If we're to delve into honorable mentions, that's my number 17.
okay. Um, yeah, no, Stagecoach is it held up surprisingly well upon like revisiting. Considering that is in old Western, I was a little. I think we talked about this on the episode. I was like, "Is this gonna hold up that well?" Oh, John Wayne, he had bad opinions. Um, and I was pleasantly surprised at how it definitely feels like a product of its time, but at the same time, it wasn't as like problematic as I worried it might be.
Hmm.
It actually, if anything, feels for 1939 somewhat progressive, maybe.
Yeah, totally. I mean, unlike
Um,
other movies that came out that year, it is
yeah,
not a fan of the Confederacy.
there you go. Also, it just like it rips. Like it's such a like a fun like like the action and stunts in it are incredible. It's got really great characters that all like play off each other really well. It's super well written. Um, yeah, cool movie.
Yeah. Uh okay, man, we're cooking. All right.
Yeah.
Uh my number 9 is Freaks. Uh
Ooh.
which I have a lot of appreciation for that movie. It's maybe one of my first 30s movies that I ever saw, and I remember being just
Mm.
really astonished by it when I first watched it. And seeing it again for the show, it's talking about movies that are progressive.
Yeah.
Like this movie, I think, even though it's kind of backwards in some ways, it is extremely forward thinking and progressive in other ways. And it's also just like a great time. It's a
Yeah.
really fun movie.
It's progressive in ways I did not see coming.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I definitely thought it would be much more of like an exploitation movie than it is. It is still kind of an exploitation movie, but I think it is so much more like empathetic, and it is like
yeah,
I think I didn't really quite realize it is the it is from the POV of the freaks.
yeah.
Um, it's like they are the heroes of the story.
It's
Um,
complex, I think.
yeah. Um, I it didn't make my list, but I think a big reason for that is because it feels so censored to me. Like
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
think
that never really bothered me.
especially the ending, it like cuts off like mid scene, and then it's just like and then everything was fine. Like everyone lived happily ever. It's like wait, hang on, what? Like
Well,
you're
everything lives
in
happily ever after, except that lady, and
yeah,
that
except that
and
lady who
like,
got like her legs chopped off. But I mean, like, I still think it's like we should have seen that stuff. Like
yeah,
the fact that they filmed all that and like it got cut out, I think is it's wild that this movie exists in any state because it's
yeah,
a wild movie. But I like what I wouldn't give to see the like original uncut version of this movie because I think it would be like a straight up masterpiece. I think it would have been absolutely incredible. And I think the version of it that you can watch now is feels so kind of hampered by
hmm.
its really obvious sort of like edits that were made to it.
It still works for me. I like it a lot.
Yeah,
It's a cool movie.
I agree. My number 9 is The Invisible Man.
Hey, we just talked about that.
I know, right? But what do I have to say about Invisible Man? I don't know. Yeah, it's great. It's real spooky. Um, uh, Claude Rains is
Claude
incredible in it.
Rains, great.
Does
It's
so
got
much
it's I
with
mean,
just his voice.
speaking of camp, it's like camp and menacing at the same time.
Yeah, it's like legitimately scary at times, and I think that was a thing. Remember when like the the recent Universal remake of the Invisible Man came out? Um, the one that what's his name? Shit, who directed it? The Leigh Whannell remake of The Invisible Man came out, people were like, "Oh my god, this movie is scary." Like, Invisible Man is a scary thing. What a concept. He's invisible and it's scary. And I think as like, I don't know, as a kid looking at like old monster books and things like Invisible Man, who cares? Like his thing is he's
You can't even
invisible.
see
Like
him.
I know, like what's the big deal? And then it is like the implications of someone actually being invisible and like insane and murderous is so scary.
And that being invisible makes you insane in this
Yeah.
movie. uh
Um
yeah. And
yeah.
like,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
like what, like you're talking about, it has all this stuff about I'm going to use my invisibility powers to like take over world governments and like become the emperor of the entire
Well then it starts to
galaxy,
get like existential where it's sort of like because he's invisible, he could be in every room, and so you just have to start assuming
Yeah.
he is in every room at all times.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, it's so
yeah,
cool. I guess one other thing I should shout out about this movie is the effects, which are
amazing.
incredible,
Yeah,
incredible. The footsteps in the snow, the way that he takes the bandages off his head,
yeah,
like it blew my mind when I watched it.
yeah.
Um, so my number eight is
Mm.
this was a little tricky, but I think I'm gonna put City Lights in this
Mm.
position. I I think this is kind of just like the platonic ideal of a Chaplin movie.
Yeah.
Uh, it it kind of hits all of his beats. I think it doesn't have this sort of like it still has this sort of optimism and play where modern times is um a bit more down in the dumps, uh it feels like the end of an era. And but where yeah in City Lights, it's just like I feel like every Chaplin movie you watch, like the Chaplin movie, it's got like some kind of thing missing from the kind of platonic Chaplin movie, and this
Hmm.
just hits every beat. Uh, and so it's got like a couple of fun gags as far as the way that the synchronized soundtrack works.
Hmm.
But more or less, it's just like Charlie Chaplin at his most excellent.
Yeah,
And yeah, I quite liked it.
yeah. Probably the best thing he ever made, and I won't say anything else about it because no reason. My number eight is Design for Living, the thruple rom com directed by Ernst Lubitsch.
Hmm.
Um, a movie that if you were to like make the same script today, it would still feel like, how come no one's made this? I feel like the idea of like treating a throuple instead of I mean, this movie is a love triangle movie for like the majority of it. But I think right there's like the moment in towards the beginning and then the way the movie ends where it's just like, no, that's just a legitimate way for three people who were like romantically entangled to live. I think is a I don't know, it's
It,
not something I see depicted in culture that often.
do you mean that the way they live through most of the movie, or the conclusion that they come to at the end of the movie?
I mean, the conclusion they come to I mean, it's arguable if that is the conclusion of the movie. I think it is.
It seems like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but I think if you right, Challengers notwithstanding, which Challengers is also not even really. I think Challengers is more of a love triangle movie than uh, uh, not more than Design for Living is, but it is. I don't know. I saw that comparison being made a lot when Challengers came out, and I think it's fairly apt. But like, I don't know. That's just a thing where I was like, that no one's making rom coms about thruples now, really. And so the fact that there was one in 1933 is notable, and
Yeah.
also it's hilarious. It's such a funny, cool movie. All three leads in it are great. It has so many just like really funny, good scenes. It feels like a really kind of classical, like 30s, like screwball rom com thing. It's got like a bunch of I don't know, just kind of staples of what I think works really well about these kinds of movies, of like the the sharpness of the dialogue, the sort of the rhythms of it. Um, yeah, I feel like we didn't watch it for the show, so I didn't put it on my list. But I also want to shout out Trouble in Paradise, which is also a sort of romantic comedy, very different premise. That's more of a like heist comedy rom com thing. Also a love triangle. um, I think
You can't shake them.
I know, but that's the thing is because it's like that could be such a cliche, and I think in both of these movies, uh, Ernst Lubitsch just refuses to make it feel cliche, and it's like I think they're two really good examples of that trope being done really well. Um, Trouble in Paradise. I just rewatched that. They were playing it at the Nighthawk recently. Um, and so that's like fresh on my mind. I'm like, damn it, I would like that might even go higher on the list if I was gonna put it on the list, which I'm not gonna because it's cheating.
I mean,
But
didn't I think I put it on the list for the 20s and we didn't talk about it on the
still
podcast.
cheating.
So
But whatever. Trouble in Paradise and Design for Living both are just great examples of like early 30s comedy done really well.
hmm. Well, speaking of early 30s romantic comedies, my number
Ooh,
7 is It Happened One Night,
hey,
which is a masterfully done rom com, but like almost, we can pay respects to modern day rom coms, and it shouldn't be looked down upon so much. That being said, putting that aside, calling it a rom com feels like it's kind of cheapening It Happened One Night, where it is really just like a fantastic movie that I think is the kind of perfect example in my favorite 1930s genre of people pretending they hate each other but they really love each other, you know.
right? People being mean in funny ways.
Yes. Yeah. And, I think that we can think of the 1930s as an era where people were figuring out what to do with sound in
Hmm.
movies, right? I feel like in the last decade wrap ups, we might have been talking about like our general perceptions of the era and everything, and we
Yeah,
forgot to do that. But we can wrap that in a bit, I guess. Like, It Happened One Night, and stuff like Bring Up Baby, like these are things that are incredibly dialogue driven, uh specifically using the abilities of this new medium of sound in motion pictures, uh to to do something that couldn't be done before, to emphasize these kind of interesting unique aspects of like banter. I mean, I think this movie is about banter, and
right.
it's masterfully put together banter. When we talked about Clark Gable's shit-eating grin in Gone with the
Oh,
Wind, I think that was kind of pioneered in this movie,
yeah.
uh,
He's
and
really breaking in the shit eating grin in this movie.
and yeah, it's just a great time. It's a really fun movie. You really buy into the romance of it, the journey that they go on, and the fact that there's an auto gyro in it. I'm all about it.
Love to see that. It's funny you say that, like, oh, like calling this a rom com, it feels like it's like not doing it justice. I feel like that's because every modern rom com is like chasing this movie.
Right? Yeah.
Right. It's like this like set the standard for like, oh, this is like what this genre is, kind
Hmm.
of. Which I feel like I'd heard before, but then like watching it, I'm like, yeah, I totally agree. Like this is like the uh Rosetta Stone. Is that the right
Yeah.
analogy? Whatever. Um,
It's translating the ancient language of rom com that's just hovering in the ether
yeah.
into something that movies can
Um,
experience.
I'm just gonna keep talking about it because my number 7 is It Happened One Night. So,
Oh, hey,
uh,
look at that.
great movie. Um, yeah, like the quintessential rom com. Great banter. I think that is something where I think
The
a lot of
genesis of Bugs Bunny.
yes, like legitimately. I think a lot of the really late 20s, really early 30s comedies and things that were really dialogue driven felt very stagey. They felt very much like stage productions that were being filmed.
Yeah.
Whereas I think once we start getting into a little bit like 32, 33, 34, right, with like the Lubitsch stuff that we just talked about, and then this movie, they feel really cinematic. Like they have like miniature shots and they have like effects and they have like stuff that you could never do on a stage. Stuff that feels wholly, unique to movies.
It really took 30s
And
movies a couple years to find their feet as
yeah.
far as not being crap, you know?
Another thing I think this movie is like a not necessarily a pioneer of, but it's like such a like quintessential example of is like the road movie, right? Where it's like
Right.
two people
Yeah.
like stuck together on the bus, like traveling, just like trying to find a hotel room for the night. And it's like, um, yeah, it's like all of that stuff that you'd want out of a good road movie. But yet I also think watching it now, it doesn't feel stale. Like it still has a kind of like um there's an exuberance and there's an energy to it that keeps it really entertaining even now when it's like we've had a bazillion movies like this. It's still sort of like this is still one of the best kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, my number 6 is King Kong,
Oh,
which I'm sure is higher up on the list for you, but
maybe.
Uh, King Kong is an astonishingly well put together movie. It's a lot of fun. It holds up super well. I mean, I think that like a concern that a lot of people have with watching old movies is that it won't be entertaining. It'll be boring,
Hmm.
you know? And King Kong is never boring. King
No.
Kong is King Kong is watching a giant ape smash things, and enjoying the experience of that. Uh, the effects in this are so ahead of their time.
Yeah.
The way that they integrate the puppets, the stop motion with the live action footage, I think is really, really, really well done. And there's like a real like sense of kind of terror and adventure in this movie. Uh, you know, I think that this is one of the 1930s movies that more people have seen.
Hmm.
One of the more canonical 30s movies that not just that like normal people have seen.
Right. Yeah.
A la the Universal monster movies. Um, but I think there's a reason for that. It's a great popcorn movie. It's a great adventure movie, and it's just a whole load of fun. It's a good time.
Yeah.
King Kong.
There's a reason it's been remade 3 times. Yeah,
Mhm.
for sure. I won't say more about it because maybe it'll show up on my list at some point, possibly.
You should
Uh,
just do that when it doesn't show up.
yeah,
Just say that, like tease it.
yeah. My number 6 is The Bride of Frankenstein,
Oh.
another whale picture. I just feel like I was so like not shocked by this movie, but I was just like, I just think it rules. I just think it's like such a I think it has real, genuine, uh, like pathos to it. Like
Hmm.
I think Boris Karloff is even better in this movie than he is in the first Frankenstein movie. I think the first Frankenstein movie is like very cool and is super iconic, all of that stuff. But it I feel like it doesn't really get at what I thought was really interesting and cool about the book Frankenstein,
Hmm.
which is the like whole concept of like this person who's been created and then like thrown aside and like what would that do to someone who had like no other concept of what being alive is like. And I think this movie is actually kind of trying to like peel back that question a little bit more. It feels like, even though it's a sequel, it feels like a much more kind of faithful adaptation of the book Frankenstein.
Hmm.
Um, and then
The
also, yeah, like all of the sort of like super gothic stuff, all of the super campy stuff. It just has there's so much.
smoke good.
Exactly. Like fire bad is like, I didn't realize that is just verbatim a thing from this movie. Um like I think everyone knows like how iconic the first Frankenstein movie is. It's like really obvious. Whereas I think this has like kind of permeated the culture kind of just as much, but in maybe less obvious ways.
Frankenstein is Night of the Living Dead. Bride of Frankenstein is Return of the Living Dead.
Oh,
It's
see,
it's
I've
the
never seen Return. I've only seen
You haven't
Night
seen
and
Return of
Day.
the Living Dead?
I've only seen Night and Day.
It's so good. It is the
And I'm not
campy.
talking about the James Mangold Tom Cruise vehicle either.
It's the campy response to Night of the Living Dead. It is, I believe, the origin of zombies saying brains.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
it is a boatload of fun. It has great animatronics. It has a cop. It has a zombie who grabs a police radio and says, "Send more cops," because he wants to eat them. I think it is in line with Bride of Frankenstein
Mm.
in being this movie that kind of takes this kind of more self-serious or original material and just has fun with it. But
But then, like, Bride of Frankenstein also ends with like the monster, like destroying himself and saying, "We belong dead," which is
yeah,
just like,
yeah,
it's very operatic and it's very over the top. But it's like,
yeah,
I don't know, it really gets at some. There's some real emotional heft, I think, to
hmm
the monster actually like genuinely being able to like communicate his own thoughts, and like the I don't know, the monster actually kind of reckoning with his own mortality and like existence. And I think it
yeah.
has all of that like cool existential stuff also, in addition to just being a romp where, yeah, he smokes a cigar and goes, "Smoke good." You get the best of both. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
why that's why it's my number 6.
The silly and the meaningful all in one, which is what
Indeed.
I tend to enjoy in a movie. Uh my number 5 is not silly at all. It is M. Uh
Ooh.
the Fritz Lang movie M, which is just kind of harrowing portrayal of the process of capturing a serial killer, and like a kind of child predator, basically. Uh, Peter Lorre does an incredible job. He is so
Yeah.
good in this
So
movie.
good.
Uh, in the way that he portrays this person, the way that he shows his fear and his menace. uh the movie is just so eerie for its time, for being a really early 30s movie. It has these really smart ways that it uses sound to tell a story.
Yeah.
um and it is it's an extremely compelling watch. It's a super super good movie that's like, at times, this kind of horror, at times like a kind of crime procedural. Yeah, maybe a progenitor of Silence of the Lambs in a way. It it it's yeah, it's an incredibly compelling, like a really really good movie.
Yeah.
M.
It is like, there's, I think, very few movies that we've watched like for the show, or just like from very few movies that are like this old that I would describe as harrowing.
Yeah.
And I think absolutely like, uh it 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 earns that, you know? It's like it's a really good like, yeah, like crime procedural serial killer movie. And it's really creepy. Um another thing that I feel like people are like, old movies aren't scary. I'm like, M is like really like unsettling. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily scary, but it's just like ugh, I this is this is yeah, it's great. Um Speaking of harrowing Fritz Lang movies, my number 5 is Fury.
And this is my number 4, so we'll just talk about
Oh,
it.
great. Let's just talk about Fury then. Um, yeah, what a like bold and very also yeah, also harrowing, also like very upsetting movie in ways that I'm not used to like movies from this era being. And just like how willing it is to like confront like human flaws and like human I don't know, like I'm trying to think of the right something more harsh than flaws. It's
Yeah.
like breaking
Like
evil apart.
prejudice and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this movie and also it's like it's not just, it's human, but it's also kind of uniquely American ways
Yeah.
of perceiving crime and mob justice
In
and
ways
that
that
kind of
feel
thing.
so relevant today.
Yeah, yeah. And this was
In
his first movie that he made in America, and it's such a well observed picture of American prejudice.
yeah.
Even though there are aspects of it that are kind of trying to represent the Nazis, right? Uh,
Right. But
Coming from where he came from.
I think even he was able to kind of notice some of the parallels.
Yeah, yeah.
Um I do think it's kind of wild how he had been right spending his last couple years in Germany, kind of like he made M and then he made the Testament of Dr. Mabuse, which is like such a sort of directly like anti-Nazi movie, and also very much about the idea of like hatred being like this like communicable disease, almost this thing that like spreads between people that like infects your mind. And then he escapes all that. He's like, I'm gonna flee Europe and I'm go to Hollywood, I'm gonna make movies there. And he immediately makes this thing. It's like, you guys got some issues you got to deal with too. Like, just letting you know.
Yeah.
um like, I think this movie feels very confrontational in a way that I'm not used to seeing from, I feel like I'm harping on this a lot of like old movies aren't usually this good, bull, and that's not what I mean. Old movies are usually very good, but I like usually when I think of stuff from the 1930s that is like really gets me, really like is really affecting. I think of things like It Happened One Night or King Kong or whatever. Whereas Fury is like such this like targeted thing of like uh
It's a mean movie.
right, it's a mean movie, but it also is like it's a movie that's like trying to act that's like trying to understand too. That's like what makes people behave this way? Like
Mhm.
how did we get here? Kind of.
Yeah, it's talking about cycles of violence. It's talking about prejudice. It is yeah. It's talking about the ways that we can be corrupted by senses of r- righteousness
Hmm.
and a sense of knowing, right? I think that Fury is a movie that is pretty upset at people who make a judgment without really thinking about the consequences or thinking complexly about the people that they're judging. And it's basically like you're a monster. You can become a monster through your prejudice. And
Yeah.
here is how that happens.
And also the thing where it's like this can happen to this isn't a thing that like you're predisposed to. It's like any normal person
Yeah.
when put through the ringer can become a like hate-filled monster. And
Yeah.
that's I don't know, that this movie's deep, man. I don't know. Like I was like, damn, this is really going places.
It's good.
Um yeah, and then also it's got really great performances across the board. It's really well made. Um,
Spencer Tracy, who makes an appearance in The Aviator.
there you go. Yeah. Uh, Terry the dog, who later starred in Wizard of Oz, plays Rainbow, who gets blown up with dynamite in this movie, which is very sad. Um,
DoesTheDogDie.com.
yes, exploded with dynamite in this movie. The
I wonder if this is on that website.
I hope so because there's a very clear answer. Um, yeah, just like I don't know. Maybe that was your number four. My number four is M. So I'll just roll right into that, I guess.
Hmm.
M, also a movie by Fritz
We're
Lang.
just swapping our Fritz Lang
I
movies.
know we're just talking. This is the whole middle of the pack, like Fritz Lang movie corner. Um, what do I want to say about M? M also, I mean, like for we were just talking about, I just like how like harrowing and sort of like upsetting it is. Um, I think it also has kind of in its crime procedural stuff. It also has this. There's an element of the premise that I think is just really exciting and cool. Also, which is that it's the fact that like the entire criminal underworld of whatever German city this is supposed to be all sort of gets together and they're like, "Hey, this sucks. There's a serial killer who's out killing children. We don't like this any more than anyone else does. We're gonna go find him and get him ourselves." And so there's the thing of like, there's the whole like police sort of detectives like trying to find the serial killer, and there's all the like safe crackers and like sort of the like organized crime people that are also sort of putting together their own like criminal investigation. Um, and then yeah, there's the whole sort of like underground sort of like crime court that they put together.
TikTok, Mr. Wick.
Um, right? It has almost it feels like it has like seeds of like Batman and like John Wick, sort of like this sort of like ex- criminal underworld stuff. Thing that Fritz Lang loves. I mean, that's in like a bunch of
And
his movies.
Spies and Woman in the
Yeah.
Moon.
Um, the Dr. Mabusa also.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but so I think there's that element too, where it's like there's parts of this movie that are just like yes, hell yeah. In addition to it being like, oh my god, this is like upsetting me. But then right, it ends with the whole like you know uh sort of uh the court of the city, really, right? It's like it's the criminals, but it's also like all of the parents of the victims like all to get together.
Hmm.
And there's that kind of similar in Fury, right, where you're like, do these people have the right to just like murder this guy without a proper like criminal trial, when he's pleading with them like, I'm sick, I have a disease, like i
Yeah.
i i don't want to do these things, I have like a
He's sympathetic in
compulsion.
many ways. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's you start to really it's like when Peter Lorre is like breaking down on the stand and talking about how it's like how much of like a an illness this is for him. It's like I definitely like I feel like that has a lot just to say about like how the criminal justice system works in any
Yeah.
context. But then I like how the movie kind of leaves off on this thing where like it doesn't give you a clear answer to like who's right or who's wrong in this situation.
Hmm.
It kind of just leaves it a little ambiguous in a way that I think Fury doesn't quite. Fury, because it's a Hollywood movie and it's made like during the Hays Code, I feel like it's a little bit more like pat. That's a little bit more. It has a bit more of a kind of Hollywood-ish ending in a way that I don't think actually ruins Fury. I think it still kind of gets away with it, but I think M is a much less I don't know, sort of like neat ending.
I think that like M has ambiguous feelings about or what's the word? It has ambivalent feelings about criminal justice where Fury has very clear feelings on mob justice.
Mm.
And I think that those can live together. I don't think that Fury feels like a cop out in that way,
I
you
don't
know?
either, but I do think it's like it's noticeable how much more of like a Hollywood product Fury is compared to M,
Hmm.
which is a German movie. Um,
Has a certain European ambiguity.
it does. M feels just a little bit darker and a little bit more willing to like be ambiguous, I think, than Fury does. But I think they're both great movies.
um, Wait, so Fury was what? Your number
Fury
five?
was my number 5, M was my number 4. So you're number
Okay, we
4.
just swapped them. My
Okay.
number 4 is Fury.
Okay, so you're
So
number 3.
my number 3 is Make Way for Tomorrow. Uh,
Ooh.
I am a sucker for a day ruiner of a movie. Um, and and this is a movie that Orson Welles said it is the saddest movie ever made, and it can make a stone cry. And I think he might be right. I mean, I have to
Can
think
make a
about this a
stone
bit,
cry.
but this might be the saddest movie that I've ever seen in my life. Uh, I, or at least like I had the strongest sadness reaction to it because I would say the last half hour of this movie I was literally biting the corner of a pillow and sobbing. I was like
Damn.
openly sobbing and I couldn't control myself for this movie. And you got to pay that some respect, you know? Uh
Absolutely.
this movie is uh it is extremely sad, but it doesn't feel cloying. I think that's something that
Mm.
something that is trying to be. I don't know if you think about like Requiem for a Dream or something like that. It's a movie that is just kind of going like, look how dark and sad everything can get. Whoa, you know.
It's not hitting you over the head with it necessarily the way that
No,
that movie
that
is.
I think
Yeah.
that this movie, even though I had like a really extreme reaction to this movie, it's a pretty subtle movie in a lot of ways. It has these really um these really well observed moments of the ways that old people are disrespected in the world and by their kids, and it all kind of builds toward making this picture of of this older couple who is just they're losing each other, they're losing their connection to their kids, um and
This movie
uh
is so
and
sad.
they're losing their agency in their own lives, and it studies these things in such detail, uh and then just uses it to just crank up that sadness in ways that I find not manipulative. I find them masterful because it's something that's true. It's speaking to something really true. Uh and yeah, it's just incredibly, incredibly well done. When Leo McCarey, I haven't seen The Awful Truth, but when Leo McCarey won the Best Picture for The Awful Truth, and then said that he should have won for this movie instead,
Mm.
I agree with him because I think this is one of the best movies ever made.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have as strong of a reaction to it as you did. I I wish I did. I mean, like, I don't wish that much sadness necessarily on myself, but it's like I like when I have a really strong reaction to something, right? I like when movies make me feel something.
Hmm.
This movie definitely made me very sad, and I definitely teared up. Although I don't know if I there are definitely other movies I think that I had a stronger like just like full just like sadness like outpouring of. Um, which isn't anything against this movie. I think this movie, like you said, is like it is extremely sad without ever feeling like it's overdoing it.
Hmm.
It doesn't hit you with like a bunch of like really sentimental music. It doesn't like it's almost the restraint of the movie that I think kind of makes it even sadder is the fact that you're watching
Yeah.
these two people like trying to put a brave face on. You're seeing both of them just like try to like push their own feelings of sadness down.
You're watching them have to show restraint
Yeah.
like, social cohesion, and you can see the suffering that's happening underneath that.
Yeah. Oh god, this movie is yeah. Uh yeah, it's incredible. It's so yeah, I don't know. It's just it's very it's very emotional, but it is very smart about the way in which I think it uh it sort of gets the audience on board with that emotion. I think there's some parts of it that maybe feel a little old fashioned to me. There's like I don't know. There's like, oh, grandma, we're trying to have our bridge tournament in our like tuxedos tonight, and I'm like, what? What is this? Who acts this way?
I mean, that's just funny though,
It is. But I think like there's things like that that just kind of feel dated because like who has bridge tournaments in their apartment wearing tuxedos anymore? But
I have a new plan for something right now.
hey, but yeah, like the two lead performances are so good, and yeah, I think it is like it's the subtlety of it. It's the fact that they're not playing the sadness. It's the fact that they're playing the restraint,
Yeah.
and that is watching them like clearly right watching them say goodbye at the train station and then both of them not acknowledging how sad they both are and not acknowledging that they will probably never see each other again.
Oh, no.
It is heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
And I agree, like any movie that can pull that kind of emotion out of an audience, I think is something to be commended. Um, Speaking of tear jerkers, my number three, City of Lights.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
as Chaplin loves to put in his opening credits, make it'll give you a laugh and maybe a tear. Um, but I think, like you said, this is the ideal of a Chaplin movie. This is where I feel like all of his like storytelling instincts click together the best. Um, and I think this movie does make me cry. I also think it's very funny. I think it has some incredible examples of like of silent comedy and like
Mhm.
really well like designed silent comedy. Um,
It better be after 150 takes,
right? Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. This feels very much like Chaplin's masterpiece. I know we're going to be getting into some more famous Chaplin pretty soon, but I think I don't know. I don't know if anything's going to beat this for me. Like City Lights is probably one of the best silent movies ever made. I think it is like it's one of the last, and it feels very much like this sort of like pinnacle of that sort of like subset of like filmmaking as an art form.
Mhm. Yeah, it has this kind of proto Spielbergian sentimentality, I think.
Mm.
Uh, I think that, compared to the other silent comedians, Chaplin was sentimental. He was
Yeah.
Hollywood sentimental, and this is the one that really just hits that stuff the hardest. I think.
Hmm.
Um, with the poverty, with the love, with the the just good nature of
Yeah.
it.
And I think a lot of Chaplin stuff can feel kind of cloying and a little obvious, or a little sort of like, all right, we get it, Charlie. Like you want us to cry here. But yeah, I feel like City of Lights just it threads the needle perfectly between
Mhm.
like comedy and tragedy, I guess.
My number two is one we've touched on before, which is Design for Living.
Hey,
I love this movie.
it's very
I
good.
um I started watching this by myself, and 5 minutes in, I, like, called my partner over, and I was like, "You need to watch this movie because this is so good." Like, it's so fun. Like, let's just start this over right now because this movie is incredible and it slaps. It is. I I had the biggest grin on my face from moment one to end credits of this movie. Like the way the dialogue works, the kind of just masterful uh, 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 banter and dialogue in this movie. The way the characters play off of each other is so good, so funny. I am just, even when it's not funny, I'm having an incredible time with this movie. I was shocked at how good this movie was.
Yeah. Um, I also think it like when when it gets a little dramatic, I think it still works really well. I think like
Mhm.
I get really get I've seen this movie once, but I got very invested in the actual like uh the 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 romantic plot of it. I'm like, no, like I want these people to be happy. Um and Edward Everett Horton is there just being a jerk to everybody. He's so good in this and many other similar like
Great
30s
character
comedies.
actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also in uh uh Trouble in Paradise.
What?
Um
He's in Top Hat as well, right?
yeah. Yeah. Um and yeah, I mean I watching Trouble in not to make this about Trouble in Paradise also, but I feel like since we didn't watch that for the show, I need to keep bringing it up because I also really like it. Um, when I saw that at Nighthawk recently, like it killed. Like people, the whole theater loved it. Like it was. Um, I think both of these movies are really good examples of like that the what do they call it, the Lubitsch touch, where it's just like there's kind of a I don't know, like a cheekiness to it that
Mhm.
feels unique amongst the kind of 30s comedies. There's a lot of cheekiness in 30s comedies, but Lubitsch stuff just feels cranked up a bit more. Um,
He can do no wrong, honestly. Like I
yeah,
love.
it's
I
like
think
I don't
I
know
think Ernst
however many
Lubitsch
movies
might be
we've
one of
watched.
my favorite directors ever. Uh,
Same, like, and I've
all
seen what like four of his movies. By the time he like came to Hollywood, he'd already made like hundreds or something like that, like a ridiculous amount. So like I want to go back. He made like historical epics in Germany and stuff that's like completely different from the stuff that we've watched.
Historical epics usually
Um,
bore me, but I trust him.
right. But I think the stuff he's most famous for, right, are like this era of Hollywood comedy. And I think there's even amongst this like genre that I do really like of the right the kind of like banter filled, very kind of like mean like rom-com kind of stuff. It's like nothing, I feel like nothing beats uh well, I say nothing beats, but it's great. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your
um
number two?
so my number two is a 30s comedy with lots of banter and mean talking. It is The Thin Man.
Nice.
um just one of my favorite movies ever. Like I'd seen this before we watched it for the show, and um, I feel like I like just kind of watched this like on TCM one day and was like, "Where did this come from? Like, why did no one tell me this movie existed? This is so funny." Um, Another thing that yeah, it's like I have just as much. I think like even though I've always liked watching old movies and I've always felt like old movies are just as worth watching as anything else, I do feel like there's a certain amount of like prejudice I've have against them of just sort of like old comedies aren't actually like as funny though, right?
It just kind
And
of
then
it's a natural inclination that I think a lot of
yeah,
people have. But I think yeah, in doing this show, we've realized that it, we kind of knew already, but we have really just shown that that is not the case. That
yeah,
things can hold up quite well, and you can judge things by modern standards, and stuff from 100 years ago is still incredible.
Yeah. So I was just saying all the praises of Ernst Lubitsch movies, which I do love. I do think The Thin Man is easily my favorite example of this kind of type of 30s comedy.
Hmm.
Maybe it's because they're like extra mean in this movie. I don't know. But it's like, I think I said this on the episode where we talked about it, where it's like, it's one of my favorite portrayals of a married couple in
Hmm.
anything,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's like, it's never, their marriage is never played for like cheap drama. There's never any question of like, oh no, like, is their marriage in trouble? Oh no, like what's they got problems, like,
They even just kind of like ironically joke about that stuff in the
yeah,
movie.
they like anytime there's like, it might seem like, ooh, this is like a thing, there's gonna be like some strife. It's like, no, they're both entirely secure in their relationship. They don't care. They just want to get drunk. The fact that they are absolutely sloshed through the entire movie
Hilarious
is
choice. Amazing choice.
uh would not be hilarious in real life, I'm sure, but in a movie it is incredibly charming. I think charming is really the sort of the big word in the word cloud, right, that comes up for this movie, that is just like knocks me off my feet every time, where I'm just like, oh, so charming. I can't handle it. They have a dog that helps them solve crimes, that's adorable. Like, there's just also like, this movie is, for as much as we say like, oh, these movies are like surprisingly progressive or surprisingly this or that, I do like how 30s The Thin Man feels. Like, it feels very of its time in a way that I do find charming.
Hmm.
Um, Mostly in just the like the slang, the vernacular of a lot of the dialogue. Um, it's written by Dashiell Hammett, who wrote a bunch of hardboiled detective stories, and that was his one like comedic one that he decided to do. And yeah, it's wonderful. I love it so much.
Nice. Man, we're up to number ones. Uh,
Oh
Let
boy.
me, because by deduction, and I probably could have guessed this 10 years ago, of what your number one 1930s movie is. Uh,
It was close.
I'm just gonna throw out some honorable mentions, because why
Okay,
not?
okay.
I'll do my from 20 to 11 real quick,
Sure.
which are The Man Who Knew Too Much, 39 Steps, Double Hitchcock, Frankenstein, Stagecoach, Things to Come, Bringing Up Baby, All Quiet on the Western Front, Modern Times, The Thin Man, and Port of Shadows. Uh, those
I
are
mean,
those are
Bring Up Baby and All Quiet on the Western Front. I feel like those in particular, I feel like I want to shout out also. Those are both, and like such opposite movies. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, we got a lot of good stuff
All of these
in
movies
this
are good.
decade.
Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of really dang good movies from the 1930s.
So
OMG.
as much as I love The Thin Man, it is without a question one of my favorite movies. I will watch that movie anytime, anywhere. But also it's set at Christmas, so it's like it's especially good as like a Christmas movie.
Hmm.
Um, I came very close to putting that as my number one, because it is probably the movie that I would throw on the most readily.
Hmm.
But I feel like I can't, in good conscience, not make my number one King Kong,
Oh,
because
we
it's
we
King
switched
Kong.
we switched orders, but okay.
Oh, whoops! I thought we did that already. Whoops! I realized you did not actually say what your number one was.
Go. Let's talk about King
All
Kong.
right, all right, all right. King Kong, King Kong. I mean, King Kong and Thin Man are almost like interchangeable at this point in terms of how much I like them. I feel like I kind of like the Thin Man more like as a movie just to watch. Like, I think
But
some of the clunkiness of King Kong really stood out to me upon this recent rewatch. But it's King Kong, man. It's about a big
yeah.
gorilla that goes that they go to an island full of dinosaurs, and there's a big gorilla there, and it smashes stuff. They go to New York City, and it smashes airplanes. It's so cool.
Yeah.
In addition
Yes.
to
Yes,
also
it
being
is.
like a thing that I think I hadn't even really quite put into perspective is like how much of a groundbreaking movie it was in 1933. It's nuts that that movie came out in 33.
Yeah.
Like it is kind of by a rough estimation a fairly early talkie,
Yeah.
and it's got I don't know. I think it combines I think a lot of stuff that worked well in silent movies, like the effects and the sort of spectacle of it, with with and the characters are the characters are probably the weak point a little bit. They're the most like archetypal stuff.
I don't know. I think the racism is a weak point.
I mean, also true. There's definitely a lot of things on this rewatch where I was like, yeah, this movie's got some issues with it.
It's I
The
think I think
misogyny
it's
also.
I think it's easy to put aside because this movie is so cool, though, you know.
Right. Right. There's all the dialogue where Jack Driscoll is like, who cares? Who cares for women? They can't help being a bother, I guess. Made that way. And it's like, what the but it's also like he's
I think
wrong.
women and semen don't mix, sir.
No dames. Um but yeah, it's like it's kind of a remake of The Lost World from 25. But it's better because it has a big gorilla in it.
I'm fine
Um
with the movie being I mean, it's not even the same movie, but I'm fine with the movie being the same if the second time that you make it, it's incredible, you
It's King
know?
Kong, right.
Yeah.
Also, like, King Kong is an incredible character. One of the first
Yeah.
examples where,
Yeah.
like, he is a character that exists purely through visual effects,
The
which is
first kaiju
crazy.
movie. The first
I mean, maybe kinda.
uh yeah, and like, you know, also so much of your cultivated vibe is just Carl Denham core, you know?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, King Kong I saw King Kong as, like, a fairly young child, I think. It's maybe one of the earliest movies I can remember having seen. And I think it was a, um I don't know. It's a movie like a lot of others that I think people like Peter Jackson or Steven Spielberg will cite. It's just like this is one of the things that made me want to make movies.
Hmm.
That showed me like, oh my god, you can do anything in film. Like you can have a T-Rex fight a giant gorilla, and it feels immediate, and it feels dangerous, and it feels uh, exciting. Um, and that's yeah, I think King Kong is still a great example of that. So King Kong, good movie.
Number 1 for Glenn. My number 1 is The Wizard of Oz.
I was also like trying to deduce, through.
It's funny because like Wizard of Oz is not a perfect
Didn't
movie.
even make my list,
Yeah,
which is
what's up with
crazy.
that? That feels wrong, but
That's
we'll let it by.
yeah.
Uh, I guess Thin Man didn't make my list either. But Wizard of Oz, I if we're talking about the out of 5 scale per letterboxed, I do dock it some points because it has a kind of boring part toward the end where they're going to the witch castle. Uh, but if if I'm to rate it, if I'm to think about the highs that this movie reaches, I think that
Hmm.
I have seen very few movies that get as immaculately good as this movie. The we'd seen color before, but the masterful way that it is dispensed in this movie, it's such an inspired choice. The kind of switch from sepia to Technicolor and the way that it's presented in the movie. I was already swept up in it just from like good storytelling in the Kansas black and white segments. But when she goes to Oz, I was over the rainbow, you know. I
Hey.
I I could not believe the incredible, immaculate just magic that was happening in front of me. Uh,
It does feel like this movie. This movie feels like it should be the first like proper color movie. It's
right.
not at all, but it's like it's such a well done use of it, and it feels like such a kind of like statement almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Avatar wasn't the first 3D movie, but it was the
right,
first proper 3D
right.
movie.
It was the one that everyone goes, "Oh, okay, I see what this is all about now."
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And then much like with Avatar in 3D, never look back. Movies are all 3D now and will be forever. Um, but yeah, much like King Kong, it's like it's like in the canon, right, of just like the best movies ever, the most influential, the most impactful. It's just like it's one of these things where it's like you can no one can ever take away the like uh this the magic of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, in that sense, I think both of our number ones are very like they're both fantasy movies, really.
Mhm.
And they're both about like going to some other world kind of with like weird creatures and stuff. Which I think is something I think that is really some that's always been a part of film, right? Like from
Mm.
very early on, it was like no, it's like fantasy. It's like creating stuff that couldn't exist, uh, in a different medium. Um, and I think, yeah, no, I have a lot of respect for that. That's a big reason why I like movies as much as I do, is because
Mm.
they can kind of like create things that can't exist.
Look at it, Glenn bringing it home with a treatise on the magic of movies. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, I gushed about Wizard of Oz in the last episode, so we don't need to say too much about it. But it's great, it's incredible,
Yeah.
it's so good. The colors, the fantasy, the scarecrow. It's all great. Uh,
It also
uh,
it's a great romp. Like it's got songs, it's got dancing, it's got comedy, it's got like spooky bits. Um, yeah, it's got something for everybody.
yeah, especially you.
Unless you're a fan of the jitterbug.
Which it decidedly does not have. Yeah, wow. Those are our top 10 lists.
Yeah,
Uh I was going to say surprising, but it's not surprising because
I
all of
mean,
these movies are great.
yeah, a lot of crossover. We definitely had a good number. I think most of my top 10 was also on your list,
Mm,
but we had a couple. We each had stuff that weren't on each other's lists. That's always fun to see.
yeah. Yeah. Different things speak to us, which is why we're different people who talk
Yeah.
together on a podcast.
I don't know. I wonder if we'll ever get to a disagreement as strong as the Teddy Bears, a film that I hate and that you put as like your like number 4 for the 1900s. But
Yeah, I mean that movie is so cool.
that
It's
movie
got
is evil.
it. We can put aside the fact that it's evil because it's cool.
I mean, fair.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we meant to do this earlier, but do you have any kind of takeaways about the just general decade of the
I
1930s?
think the early 30s kind of surprised me at how kind of rough a lot of this stuff was. Like
Yeah.
there was definitely the transition into sound was movies definitely needed a year or two to kind of find their legs with like how to actually use sound effectively as part of filmmaking. But I think by like 33-ish, people had pretty much figured it out. Um, I think there are some stuff on our list that are like real standouts from like 30 through 33 that are like just so much better than anything else that was being made around the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's kind of wild once you get to like 39 and stuff is like full color. Like they feel so much more modern, I guess. You look at like a movie from 1930 and a movie from 1939, and they feel
So different.
so wildly different in terms
Yeah.
of like how they're using filmmaking, in terms of the types of stories they're telling. Um, and it's like all the same people too. It's like there hasn't been even that much. It's like it's relatively short period of time. It's like a lot of the same directors are still working, all the same actors, right? Um,
After they got kicked out when if you didn't have a voice for sound, you know.
yeah,
Uh
exactly.
yeah, I mean, like I had this kind of continual experience moving through the 30s of going, now this is a real movie, and then going, now this is a real movie, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, because, yeah, it really did start off pretty rough, you know? I think the kind of thing that I keep kind of returning to with all of this is that as a new technology is or a new like kind of formal advancement happens in the medium of film, it takes people a little while to get used to how to
Hmm.
make movies in this way. You know, it's not just that people had a hard time making sound good, it's that for a couple of years they kind of forgot how to make a movie right, you know, and then had to kind of relearn um you know, partially just because having sound imposed some kind of restrictions that people were not used to.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, yeah, like the late 20s, early 30s talkies are things that are quite rough, often in an interesting way.
Hmm.
But you know, uh, uh, some of it feels a little amateur. You know, it's amateur in the way that kind of the pre-studio movies were sometimes, uh, uh, where it was just a bunch of people putting something together and not doing an extremely good job of it, you know. Uh, but yes, once people got a sense for how to make movies, they started coming up with new genres that fit the new medium of talkies. These kind of, you know, bantery rom-coms,
Hmm.
which really would not
Musicals,
have
a
been
lot of musicals.
possible. Yeah, musicals. Um,
Okay, shout out to Maytime. I thought Maytime was super good.
Maytime's good.
Top
Shout out
Hat
to Top
also
Hat.
super good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really want to. We skipped Swing Time because we just watched
Mm,
Top Hat, but I really want to watch Swing Time because Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, great,
great.
great combo. If somebody has an RCA Selectavision player that they can send me, then I can watch this Swing Time VCD. VCD? No, CED, but I also have it on Laserdisc, so I
Oh,
can watch
great.
it.
Another very and a very modern, easy to watch format.
I'm just trying to collect every dumb video format that I
You're
can. You know, that's really my life's mission.
doing a
Uh,
great job.
but yeah, I think that by the 30s, right, by the end of the 30s, the middle of the 30s, we were just these are movies. There's no compromise here. There's
Hmm.
no, you know, you watch Frankenstein or Dracula, and these are movies that you can tell that there is some kind of compromise that's being made
Mm,
because they
yeah.
are just still learning how to shoot movies for sound. But once you get to a certain point, it really feels like there are no compromises being made, and these are the stories that are deserving to be told it, in these movies.
Yeah. Some things I just remembered that I want to quickly mention. Um, the sort of run of Warner Brothers gangster movies, I think, are really fun.
Worth
Those
mentioning,
those
yeah.
didn't make either of our lists, but like Little Caesar, Scarface, and Public Enemy, I think
Those
are
are
all
cool movies,
real
yeah.
great fun movies. Um, uh, Another thing is that James Whale directed the talkie portions of Hell's Angels, or at least some of them. So that's kind of I don't know, just a fun connection between the two filmmakers that we watched biopics of.
Oh, true.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
James Whale also worked on Hell's Angels. Um, and I guess that was it.
That was the 1930s. It felt like a breeze.
Yeah,
Uh, I am, I think that I'm looking forward to another great decade of movies, I guess is what I'll say.
me too.
I'm very excited for the 1940s because Glenn is uh one part King Kong and one part Sam Spade, and so I'm sure you'll get a lot of that out of that too.
Do I need to like do a character on that episode? Do I need to like wear like a hat the whole time or something?
That's what being doing character is, right? It's wearing a hat.
Yeah, that's what characters are, right? People who wear hats.
Yeah, that's it for our kind of loosey goosey 1930s
Yeah,
wrap up
bring me some
episode.
drink.
I took my final sip already. There's maybe a little. Ah, okay. I got the last little drop of my uh what's it called? Bee sting?
Bee's knees.
Bee's knees.
Yeah.
Uh that is it for this episode. Thank you all so much for following along with us through the 1930s. You can check us out on the social medias and all of that. I just splurged on a letterboxed pro so I could do some fancy letterbox
Ooh,
stuff.
fancy, fancy.
I've been going hard on letterbox in the last couple days, and so I made letterboxed lists for every movie that we've covered on the podcast, as well as our top 10 lists. And I'll continue to do that. So you will have a presence on Letterboxd, which I feel like is kind of long overdue.
Mm.
That has been fun.
I was
And
looking at the list of everything we've covered on the show. There were a few that I hadn't actually marked as seen, so I remedied that. So now I'm caught up.
good. Yeah, our list of movies that we've covered on the show,
It's
I will never
bonkers.
reach. It is over 500.
Yeah. I mean, to
And
be fair, a lot of those are the like early 1890s stuff that are like a minute long, you know?
there are over 130 feature length movies that we have covered on the show, and then over 500 individual things that we have mentioned.
Right.
Like, yes, they are short. They're 15 seconds to
Hmm.
5 minutes long. A lot of these, but we had something to say about
Yeah.
500 different things.
Yeah.
I think that's
Launch of the
something.
USS Albion. Great picture.
I'm definitely pretty proud of our output. I think, and the thing I was going to say about our total list of movies that we've talked about on the podcast is that we will never reach 100% watch rate on them because there are a couple movies that we talked about that are lost forever,
Ah,
like
right.
the Méliès Little Red Riding Hood.
Hmm.
But just you can just sit in that non-completion and check out that letterbox list. And if you don't want to listen along, it's pretty easy to watch along and use that list to catch up to everything that we've done. Fun
Yeah.
time. Old movies.
You also have, I think, each of our top tens, which will also
Yes.
have. I mean, it's less useful now that the movies aren't like public domain and just freely available places. But like, I'll still make the YouTube playlist for like renting each one. So
Right.
if you want to at least be able to like watch any of any of the top tens, there will still be YouTube playlists for those.
But yeah, I mean, we have covered what? I don't
We've
know,
come a
something like
long way.
45 years of movies.
Yeah, we've really done. I mean, this getting to the 1930s feels like a pretty distinct like chunk
Yeah.
of like film history, whereas now we're in like a very different era. I think 30s through like I don't know 30s through the 50s, I guess, kind of feels like its own chunk. Um,
Yeah. and you know, I've always kind of had the experience of talking about this podcast to people, and they're like, "Oh, great! You know, you've made it from 1895 to 1923, like a
Hmm.
bunch of stuff that I've never heard of and don't care about." You know,
Right.
and when I talk about it now, people go, "Oh, Wizard of Oz! Wow, you've made it all
I
the way
know
to
what
Wizard
that
of
is.
Oz." So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a good ride.
Just wait till we get to Casablanca, Citizen Kane,
Very soon. We
very
will get to
soon.
both of those very soon. Uh, yeah. So join us in the 40s. We're gonna talk about noir. We're gonna talk about Kane. We're gonna talk about, I don't know, Bergman. I think uh, uh, there's a lot of great stuff coming up in the next
Yeah.
decade.
I think like the 30s, 40s are going to be pretty Hollywood heavy.
Hmm.
But as we always try to do, we're going to try to, explore the world of cinema as much as we can. Try to find
Keep it
interesting
diverse.
stuff. Yeah.
So yeah, as always, I mean, you know, like we kind of we're ending up having to focus on a lot of classics and that kind of thing, but send in your recommendations for deep
Mm.
cuts that we might need to catch. And yeah, thank you all for following us along through all of this. I feel like I'm just kind of rambling about all this
Yeah.
now, but you know,
It's
I've
the wrap up
had
episode.
it's the wrap up episode. It's chill.
Yeah.
I'm drinking my bee's knees, and we're having a good time.
Indeed.
Uh, well, with that being said, Glenn and the listeners, uh, welcome to the 1940s, and I'll see you next year.
See you next year.